Cassie knew she was good with tools, but nothing could have prepared her for what a simple screwdriver would unlock. When she found the long-forgotten bunker hidden beneath the mechanic shop, the last thing she expected was to discover a vault brimming with gold bars, ancient military tech, and enough secrets to make her a target. All she wanted was to fix broken engines now. She was standing at the threshold of a $100 million discovery. What happened next would change her life forever. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if you're ready to see how a $1 screwdriver can change everything, hit that subscribe button. You won't believe what Cassie uncovers next. Cassie Henderson had never been one for flashy finds. She was a mechanic, plain and simple. Her shop was her world, filled with the familiar scent of motor oil, the hum of old tools, and the comforting rattle of engines being brought back to life. But that morning, as she stood in a cluttered yard sale near the edge of town, something caught her eye. A dollar store screwdriver, rusty and old but strangely alluring. It was the kind of tool she'd use for everything, the one that would slip out of her toolbox and always seem to vanish, only to reappear when it was most needed. She wasn't looking for anything extravagant, just a few spare parts for the shop. But when the woman running the sale handed her the screwdriver for a mere $1, Cassie couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a simple tool. "Thanks," Cassie said, pocketing the screwdriver and heading back to her old, battered truck. She didn't think much more of it until that evening when she found herself back in the shop, elbow deep in a transmission rebuild. The small screwdriver was wedged between the engine block and a pile of metal, its worn handle familiar, yet out of place. It felt as if it had been waiting for her all along. As the night wore on, Cassie's mind wandered. She was working late again, the familiar rhythm of her tasks, providing the only comfort in her otherwise quiet life. Her father's old mechanic shop, now hers, had seen better days. The place was worn and weathered, much like the cars that lined the garage. She had bought it on a whim years ago, hoping to carry on her father's legacy. But life had a way of making things harder than expected. Business wasn't booming, and the bills piled up quicker than she could pay them. With the screwdriver still in her hand, Cassie turned to her old hydraulic lift. Something felt odd about it. She had fixed it dozens of times over the years, but tonight, it seemed to groan more than usual, its old gears protesting under the pressure. As she examined the lift, she noticed something strange. The floor beneath it was slightly uneven, almost as if the concrete had been altered. The unevenness was subtle, almost imperceptible, but her keen eye caught it. There was a hatch, a small, rusty door, hidden beneath years of dust and grime. Curiosity swelled within her. She set the screwdriver down on the workbench and bent over to inspect the hatch. A sense of unease crept up her spine. Something didn't feel right. No one had mentioned a hatch when she bought the shop. Had it always been there? Cassie hesitated for only a moment before grabbing the screwdriver again. She pried open the rusted bolts one by one, the faint metallic sound echoing through the otherwise silent garage. The hatch creaked and groaned as she opened it slowly, revealing a hidden chamber below. The darkness inside seemed to swallow the light, and she hesitated, wondering what might be waiting down there. But the screwdriver in her hand felt like a sign. This was what she was meant to do. So, without a second thought, Cassie dropped down into the unknown. Cassie's feet hit the cold, dusty floor below with a soft thud. The chamber was far larger than she had imagined, and the air was thick with the musty scent of age, sealed away from the world for decades. As she squinted into the darkness, a faint blue glow flickered from the far side, casting strange shadows against the walls. Her heart raced, curiosity pulling her forward, but also a gnawing sense of caution, like a whisper warning her to turn back. Instead, she pressed on, her boots crunching on the gravel floor beneath her as she moved toward the source of the light. It wasn't just a faint glow, it was a steady hum, like machinery awakening after a long slumber. The walls were lined with metal shelving units, their surfaces covered in dust and cobwebs. But there, in the center of the room, stood something she hadn't expected, a massive vault door, gleaming in the dim light. Her breath caught. The door had the unmistakable markings of military-grade equipment, USMWEA, the seal of the U.S. Military Weapons Engineering Authority. Her mind whirled as she approached, the significance of what she was seeing slowly sinking in. How had something like this ended up beneath her shop? It didn't make sense. This wasn't just an old storage facility. It was a vault, designed to keep things hidden, buried, and safe from prying eyes. As she reached the vault's center, Cassie noticed something strange. The vault's control panel had been left open, revealing a complex web of wires and glowing blue circuitry. The humming noise grew louder, as though the system was coming to life after being dormant for decades. She reached out to inspect it, instinctively pulling a wrench from her tool belt and prying open a panel to check for any obvious mechanical faults. Her fingers brushed against something cool and metallic, and before she could react, the vault door began to move slowly, with a grinding sound, but unmistakable. The heavy door inched open, revealing what lay beyond. Stacks of gold bars lined the floor, their yellow gleam dulled by age, but still unmistakably valuable. The sight almost knocked the breath out of her. Gold, lots of it, piled high in neat rows. It was almost absurd, as though the vault had been designed for something far beyond just money, something far more important. And as her eyes moved past the gold, they fell upon the machines that filled the far corner of the room. Strange, gleaming pieces of technology, some of them still softly buzzing with life. The equipment looked like nothing she had ever seen, sleek high-tech machinery that seemed far too advanced for the time period it was supposed to belong to. It was as though she had stumbled into a time capsule, sealed away in the dark for years, waiting for someone to open the door. Cassie swallowed hard, staring at the vault's contents. The gold was just the beginning. The real mystery lay within the walls of the vault itself. She slowly stepped forward, the clang of her boots echoing in the chamber as she approached one of the machines, its humming sound growing louder with each step. It was a console of sorts, glowing faintly in the dim light. Her hand hesitated just inches from the surface, unsure of what she might be activating. But in that moment, the reality of her discovery hit her. She wasn't just a mechanic anymore. She was standing at the threshold of something far bigger than any engine she had ever repaired. Whatever this was, it had the potential to change everything. A soft beeping filled the room as the machine powered up. Cassie's heart pounded in her chest as she stood in the shadow of the vault, the soft beeping of the machine echoing in the silence of the chamber. The weight of the discovery pressed down on her, each moment feeling heavier than the last. The gold was enough to make anyone dizzy, but it wasn't the treasure that haunted her. It was the technology. The strange humming machines that seemed almost alive with potential. What had been left here? And why? Her fingers trembled as she pulled out her phone, but quickly put it back in her pocket. She didn't want to risk anyone finding out about this, not yet. The vault had been here for decades. Who knew how many people might have tried and failed to uncover its secrets? She couldn't afford to be reckless. Cassie's eyes returned to the panels and consoles in the far corner of the room. The faint hum of electricity filled the air, and the machines seemed to pulse with life, waiting for someone to unlock their mysteries. A few steps closer, and she could see detailed blueprints etched into the surfaces of the machines, diagrams of what appeared to be advanced technology, a series of gears, metal conduits, and strange symbols that looked like nothing she'd ever seen. The blueprints weren't just schematics for machinery, they were for something else, something far more ambitious. She bent down to examine one of the machines more closely. A faint engraving caught her eye. It read, Project Icarus. Her breath caught in her throat. Icarus, wasn't that a myth? The story of a man who flew too close to the sun? The idea of flight, of pushing boundaries and reaching for the impossible? She felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just old military technology. It was something far more complex, something experimental. And it had been hidden away, forgotten by everyone but the past. Until now. Cassie turned away from the machine, her mind reeling. She needed answers. This couldn't be just another abandoned project. There was something here. She couldn't shake the feeling that what lay beneath her shop was a part of something much larger. Her instincts as a mechanic kicked in. She knew how to break things down, piece by piece, to get to the heart of a problem. It was time to apply that same mindset to this mystery. She began working her way through the papers strewn across the floor, flipping through faded documents and yellowed photographs. The more she dug, the more she began to see connections she hadn't expected. The project, she realized, wasn't just about machines or gold. It was a story of innovation. But there was more, something darker was hidden within the pages. The blueprints for Project Icarus were marked with dates spanning back decades, but they weren't all in English. Some of the words appeared to be encrypted, or perhaps code, a code she didn't know how to crack. As Cassie sifted through the papers, a name stood out. Doctor. Julian Hollister. It was signed on nearly every sheet, each document, each schematic, as though the entire operation had been led by him. She recognized the name from her research. It was a well-known historical figure, a scientist, but with little to no information on his later life. The few articles she found about him mentioned only his early work in aeronautics and physics, but there was no mention of why he disappeared from the public eye. Dr. Hollister wasn't just a scientist. He was the architect of something much larger, something that was hidden away, buried under years of secrecy. Cassie knew she couldn't do this alone. The pieces were coming together, but she needed help. But there was a problem. She couldn't trust anyone just yet. Whoever had hidden this vault, whoever had buried it under the floor of her mechanic shop, they weren't gone. They were still watching, still waiting. And now, Cassie was in too deep. Cassie's mind raced as she sat at her workbench, the papers scattered around her like pieces of an unsolvable puzzle. The more she uncovered about Dr. Julian Hollister and Project Icarus, the less she understood. What kind of project required this level of secrecy? And why had it been abandoned, hidden away under her mechanic shop for so many years? She glanced back at the vault, the stacks of gold glinting under the dim light, and her stomach churned. It was clear that the treasure was just a small part of something far bigger. It wasn't just a financial windfall, it was evidence of a dark chapter in history, one that no one seemed willing to remember. Cassie picked up a photograph from the pile of documents, one that had caught her eye earlier. It was a black and white picture of a group of men and women standing in front of a massive aircraft. The image was blurry, and most of the people were dressed in military uniforms, but one figure stood out. Dr. Julian Hollister, his face young but recognizable, was standing at the center, his hands resting on the wing of the aircraft. The plane itself was unlike anything Cassie had seen before. It looked like a cross between a fighter jet and something far more futuristic, as if it had come from another world entirely. Her heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just an old project. It was a failed experiment, an attempt to push the boundaries of aviation and energy. But why had it failed? And why had they chosen to bury it beneath a mechanic shop of all places? Cassie stared at the photo, feeling a mix of awe and dread. She had always been fascinated by machines, by the way they worked, and the way people could shape them into something extraordinary. But this was on a different level. Dr. Hollister had been part of something that had the potential to change everything. The aircraft in the picture wasn't just an invention. It was proof of a vision, a future that had never been realized. But if the project had failed, why was the vault still here? Why was it hidden away in a secret chamber under her shop? Cassie's instincts screamed that the answer was closer than she thought. She needed to find out everything about this plane, this experiment, and how it connected to the gold and the technology stored in the vault. Her hand trembled as she sifted through more papers, searching for something, anything that would explain how Project Icarus had gone from being a cutting-edge government initiative to a forgotten relic of the past. The pages were full of equations, notes about energy sources, and complex designs for the aircraft's propulsion system. But there was one document that caught her eye. A blueprint of the aircraft's engine, with a set of numbers circled in red ink. Cassie leaned closer, tracing the numbers with her finger. They weren't just part of the design, they were coordinates. Her heart raced. These weren't just random numbers, they were locations. Hidden places that could lead to the next phase of the project, or worse, more abandoned technology. She grabbed her phone and pulled up the coordinates on the map. They weren't far from her shop, just a few miles into the hills. The idea of venturing out into the unknown stirred something in her, a mixture of excitement and fear. What could be waiting there? Was it more of the same, a continuation of Project Icarus? Or had she stumbled onto something even darker? Cassie's fingers hovered over the map. There was no turning back now. The vault had been opened, and once you unlocked a secret, there was no unknowing it. She had to go there. She had to see it for herself, and she had no idea what she might uncover. Cassie's truck rumbled over the uneven road as she made her way through the hills. The coordinates from the blueprint led her here deep into the dense forest that surrounded the town. The further she drove, the more isolated it became. She had always loved the quiet of the wilderness, but tonight, the silence felt oppressive, heavy with the weight of everything she had discovered. Every so often, the road would break into a clearing, revealing more thick trees and the remnants of what might have been old military roads or forgotten facilities. Cassie's thoughts kept drifting back to the vault, to the gold, and the strange technology that had been hidden away beneath her feet. The more she learned, the more questions piled up. She knew there was something more to this, something bigger than just an abandoned project. It was as if the past was reaching out, calling her to uncover something that had been buried for far too long. But just as the unease began to set in, her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. She reached over and saw an unknown number on the screen. Cassie hesitated. She wasn't expecting any calls, especially not from numbers she didn't recognize. Reluctantly, she answered. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was gruff and low, the kind of voice that could either be friendly or dangerous. "Cassie Henderson?" "Who's asking?" she replied, her fingers tightening around the wheel. "Does the name Dr. Julian Hollister mean anything to you?" The question made her freeze. She didn't want to show her surprise, but her mind was racing. How did this person know about Hollister? About what she had uncovered? Was this a coincidence, or had someone been tracking her? "You have no idea what you're getting into," the voice continued. "There are things under that shop, things you don't understand. You think you're just dealing with an old project, some kind of forgotten history, but you're wrong. This goes far deeper than you could imagine." Cassie's pulse quickened. This wasn't a warning, it was a threat. "What do you want?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just leave it alone, Cassie," the voice said, almost pleading now. "Get out while you still can. There are people who will stop at nothing to make sure you never get any closer to the truth." The line went silent for a moment before the voice returned, more insistent this time. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Before she could respond, the call abruptly ended. Cassie pulled the phone away from her ear, her mind whirling. Was this some sort of government official? A person connected to the project she'd uncovered? The way they spoke made it sound like they knew exactly what she had found, like they had been watching her. Cassie's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Whoever had called, they weren't going to stop her. Not now. Not after everything she had uncovered. She didn't know who they were, but they were right about one thing. This was bigger than she realized. And the more she found out, the more she understood just how deep the rabbit hole went. She wasn't about to back down. She hadn't come this far just to turn around. Cassie's truck finally came to a stop at the foot of a steep hill, the road having disappeared into the thick woods long ago. Her headlights cast long shadows over the forest floor, and the silence surrounding her seemed almost unnatural. The unease from the phone call still lingered in the pit of her stomach, but it wasn't enough to stop her now. She had come too far, uncovered too much to turn back. Ahead of her, barely visible through the trees, a structure loomed. The building was old, camouflaged by the forest's thick undergrowth. It looked like an abandoned military outpost, with crumbling concrete walls and broken windows. Cassie could feel her heart beat faster as she stepped out of the truck, the air crisp and cold against her skin. The only sound was the soft rustle of leaves underfoot. She approached the building cautiously, her instincts telling her to be careful. This wasn't just a forgotten outpost, it was a part of the puzzle, a key to understanding the rest of what she had found. Whatever was hidden here, it was tied to Project Icarus. It was tied to everything. Cassie reached for the old, rusted door handle, but before she could pull it open, a strange noise echoed from behind the building, a low, mechanical hum that sent a shiver down her spine. She froze, listening carefully. It wasn't just the wind. This was something different, something purposeful. Without thinking, she darted around the side of the building, her boots crunching against the dry leaves. The noise grew louder, more distinct. She rounded the corner and stopped dead in her tracks. In the center of the clearing, half buried under moss and vines, was a massive, metal door completely out of place. Against the natural landscape, Cassie's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the markings on the door. It was unmistakable, another vault. And not just any vault. This one was the same as the one beneath her shop, bearing the same insignia, the U.S. Military Weapons Engineering Authority. Her hands shook as she stepped closer. This was it. The key to everything. The gold, the strange machines, and the project it all led here. Cassie crouched in front of the door, her fingers brushing over the cool metal. It was locked, of course, but she wasn't going to let that stop her. She pulled out her screwdriver, the same one she had bought for $1 at the yard sale. She wasn't sure why she'd kept it, why it felt like it had some kind of significance. But tonight, it felt like fate. It was time to put the tool to work. She began to pry at the door's bolts. the metal groaning under her pressure. The hum from inside grew louder, almost rhythmic now, as though it were waiting for her to open it. The screwdriver slipped in her hand as she twisted it, her muscles aching from the effort, but then suddenly a loud click echoed through the night. The door, heavy and imposing, creaked open. Cassie took a deep breath and pushed it aside, stepping into the darkened room beyond. What she found inside was even more overwhelming than the vault beneath her shop. The room was filled with machines, large, intimidating pieces of technology, much like the ones she had seen in the first vault. But this time, the machinery wasn't dormant. It was active, humming with an eerie life of its own. The glow from the machines cast strange shadows on the walls, and in the center of the room sat a large, glass-like capsule, its interior filled with an unknown substance that shimmered in the dim light. Cassie moved closer, her curiosity now fully overtaking her fear. There, in the center of the capsule, lay something that took her breath away. It was a plane, no, not just a plane. It was a prototype, its sleek body unlike anything she had ever seen. The designs she had seen in the documents began to make sense. This wasn't just a military project. It was an attempt to change the very nature of flight. And that plane, it was Project Icarus. Cassie felt a deep connection to it, almost as if she had been pulled here, drawn to this place by something more than mere curiosity. She was beginning to understand the significance of what she had uncovered. This was the heart of the project, and with it, the power to rewrite history or destroy it. She reached out, her hand trembling, as she touched the glass. And in that instant, the room seemed to come alive. The machines hummed louder, the light grew brighter, and Cassie felt a pulse of energy rush through her through the entire room. This was no longer just an abandoned project. It was a living, breathing thing, waiting to be activated. The realization hit her like a jolt. Cassie wasn't just uncovering the past anymore. She was standing on the precipice of something far bigger, and it was waiting for her to make the next move. Cassie stood in front of the strange, glowing capsule, her hand still resting on the glass. The energy in the room was palpable, electric, alive, as if the entire place was waiting for something. The machines hummed louder now, their intricate circuits flashing and blinking with renewed vigor. Her heart raced in time with the pulse of the room, every instinct screaming that she was standing on the verge of something monumental. The plane inside the capsule was magnificent, a sleek, futuristic aircraft that looked like something from a science fiction novel, but its origins were undeniable. This was Project Icarus, the key to everything. Cassie felt the weight of her discovery pressing down on her. What had started as a simple curiosity about an old mechanic shop and a strange screwdriver had now become a deep plunge into a conspiracy that reached far beyond her comprehension. She wasn't alone here, though. Someone had been watching her, warning her to turn back. The phone call still echoed in her mind. The voice had been clear. "You don't know what you're getting into." Her fingers tightened around the screwdriver in her hand. She had already come too far to turn back now. She wasn't going to let the threat of danger stop her from uncovering the truth. But the question remained, what was she meant to do with this knowledge? Her gaze shifted to the large control panels surrounding the capsule. The glowing buttons, the switches, the levers, they were all begging to be activated. Cassie had no idea what would happen if she did, but one thing was certain. The world would never be the same once the capsule opened, once the project was fully revived. The power in this room, the potential, it was overwhelming. The weight of history, of technological breakthroughs, of government secrets, it was all wrapped up in this moment. For the first time, Cassie realized just how much was at stake. There were people who wanted this secret buried forever. She'd already been warned, but the danger wasn't just theoretical, it was real. Someone wanted to keep this hidden, to ensure that the world would never know what was beneath her feet. The phone call, the surveillance, the secrecy, it all pointed to something far bigger than Cassie had ever imagined. The temptation to unlock the secrets of Project Icarus, to bring this technology into the light, was powerful. But so was the fear of what might happen if she did. If this was as dangerous as it seemed, if this project could reshape the world in ways she couldn't foresee, was she ready for that responsibility? Cassie's mind raced. She thought of the gold, of the machines, of the strange blueprints she'd uncovered. She thought of the legacy she was about to inherit, the legacy of Dr. Julian Hollister, of people who had sacrificed so much to keep this secret hidden. There was no one left to protect it now. It was in her hands. "Do I open it?" she whispered to herself, her voice shaking. There was no one to answer her. No one but the machines and the hum of the energy in the room, waiting for her decision. She took a deep breath and stepped back, her mind made up. It was too dangerous to ignore. If she didn't act, someone else would, and they wouldn't hesitate to exploit the power of Project Icarus for their own gain. Cassie grabbed a nearby control lever and pulled it downward, the sound of metal clicking echoing in the room. As she did, the capsule began to shift, its contents stirring for the first time in decades. The lights inside flickered, and the machinery roared to life, with an intensity that sent a shockwave through the room. The plane inside the capsule stirred, slowly rising from its slumber. Cassie's pulse quickened. This was it. She had made her choice. There was no turning back. Cassie stood frozen, watching as the capsule door slid open, the sleek aircraft inside slowly lifting as the machinery hummed with life. The glow of the room intensified, and the sound of the engines powering up filled the space with a low, almost guttural hum. The aircraft's body shimmered in the soft blue light, its contours unlike anything she had ever seen. It was as though the future was finally emerging from the past. But as the last lever clicked into place, Cassie's exhilaration quickly turned to dread. The ground beneath her trembled, and the room filled with an ominous vibration. The machines that had been dormant for so long were now awake, but something wasn't right. The power surging through the system felt too intense, too unpredictable. She could feel it in the air, the rush of energy, the danger. The vault doors behind her slammed shut with a deafening clang, and the once welcoming light from the capsule now felt cold and sterile. Panic started to rise in her chest. She wasn't prepared. For this, no one could be. She turned toward the control panel, desperately trying to understand what was happening. The panels flashed red, signaling a malfunction, and the blueprints she had studied earlier seemed to come alive, the images of the aircraft and its systems shifting and blinking like they were trying to communicate something important. But it was too late to stop now. Suddenly, the door behind her opened with a rush of air, and a man stepped inside. Cassie froze, her heart stopping as she recognized him from the photograph in the vault, Dr. Julian Hollister. His eyes locked with hers, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Hollister was older now, his face marked with age, but his eyes carried the same intensity she had seen in the pictures. He didn't look surprised to see her, he looked almost relieved, as if he had been waiting for her all along. "I knew you'd find it," Hollister said softly, his voice echoing in the silence. "I've been waiting a long time for someone to unlock it." Cassie took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. "Who are you?" she demanded. "What is all this? Why is it here?" He shook his head, a wry smile playing at the corners of his lips. "I think you already know. You've uncovered enough to understand the significance of what's hidden here. But there's more, Cassie. There's so much more that you don't understand." Cassie felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean? What is this project? What is this plane?" Hollister stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. Project Icarus was never just about flight. It was about controlling energy, tapping into something far beyond anything we've ever imagined. We were on the brink of discovering how to manipulate time, space, and energy itself. But the project was shut down. People died. It was buried, hidden from the world. Cassie's breath caught. Time? Space? Energy? Was this what she had just unlocked? Technology so powerful, so dangerous, that the government had decided it was too much for anyone to handle? "And now?" she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "Now," Hollister said, his voice heavy with regret, "it's too late to stop. The system has been activated. The energy has already been released. There's no way to control it now. You've unleashed something that cannot be contained." Cassie's mind spun. She had unlocked a force far greater than she could have ever imagined, and now the fallout was beginning. The very thing that had been hidden away for decades was now beyond their control. And if Hollister was right, they were running out of time to stop it. A loud crash echoed from somewhere deep within the facility, and the entire building trembled. The power systems, whatever had been keeping them in check, were failing. Cassie glanced at Hollister, her heart racing. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We don't have much time," Hollister said, his expression grim. "You've made a choice, Cassie. But now, we have to live with it. The only question left is, will we survive?" The lights flickered and buzzed as the building began to shake again, louder this time. Cassie felt a jolt of panic surge through her, as the reality of what she had just unleashed hit her. She had activated Project Icarus, and now, the consequences were unfolding. There was no turning back. Cassie's heart pounded as the facility trembled beneath her feet. The machines hummed louder, almost deafening now. Hollister's face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and regret. "You've activated it," he said, voice shaking. "This wasn't supposed to happen." The air was thick with electricity as the capsule stirred, the aircraft inside slowly rising. Cassie's hand instinctively tightened around the screwdriver she still held. "What happens now?" she demanded. "The project was designed to manipulate energy, time and space," Hollister explained. "You've triggered the core. Without the proper safeguards, everything's unstable. We need to shut it down before it spirals out of control." But it was already too late. A sudden burst of light erupted from the capsule, and the entire room shook violently. Cassie stumbled back, the machines around them flashing an alarm. Hollister rushed to the control panel, typing frantically, his movements desperate. "Come on," Hollister muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. Cassie's breath was shallow, her mind racing. If they didn't act fast, whatever energy they had unleashed could tear everything apart. Just as the noise reached a deafening crescendo, Hollister hit the final key, and the machines powered down with a loud click. The room fell silent. The light dimmed, and the capsule's hum ceased. Hollister turned to Cassie, his face grave. "It's over for now. But people will come for this. For you. They won't let this stay hidden." Cassie stood, shaken, but resolute. She had opened a door she couldn't close, and now, she had to protect it. "I won't let them take it," she whispered. Cassie stood alone in the dim light of the now stilled facility, the weight of Hollister's words pressing on her. She had unlocked something ancient, something far bigger than she could have ever imagined. And now she had to guard at this project, this legacy, with everything she had. The planes, the technology, the gold, none of it mattered if it fell into the wrong hands. But with each passing second, she knew the world was about to change. The forces that wanted to control it would stop at nothing to get their hands on what she had uncovered. "I can't do this alone," Cassie murmured, her mind already formulating a plan. She had to keep this project secret, but she couldn't run forever. She needed help, allies she could trust. As she stepped away from the machines, a strange sense of determination washed over her. The legacy of Project Icarus wasn't just about technology. It was about control, about power. And now, it was her responsibility to decide how that power would be used. She knew it wouldn't be easy. But Cassie Henderson wasn't just a mechanic anymore. She was the keeper of secrets, the protector of a new future, one that she would fight to the very end to protect. "Let them come," she whispered. "I'll be ready."